Welcome back, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for another explainer. So today, we're going to slow things down. We are zooming all the way in. We are embarking on this really cozy, chronological micro-exploration, and it's derived entirely from a home gardener's recent diary entry. You know, we talk about these massive, world-changing concepts on this show all the time. But honestly, sometimes the most captivating learning happens when we just look at the quiet, persistent details of the natural world. So today we're using this diary entry as our magnifying glass, allowing us to step directly into the shoes of a passionate gardener. We'll be looking at a very specific plant, a very specific set of decisions, and really the beautiful patience required to cultivate life from the soil. So get comfortable, focus in, and let's get ready to be amazed by the intricate details of a simple garden project.
Okay, let's dive into this. The title of this entry is just fantastic. Notes on Gardening, Part 945. Part 945! By our author, Eng. I mean, that number alone instantly drops us into a deeply personal and incredibly dedicated botanical journey. This isn't just someone's fleeting weekend hobby that they might abandon next month, right? No, this is a meticulous, long-term documentation of a real relationship with nature. And by opening the entry with the phrase, "Dear Interweb," Anne creates this wonderfully inviting atmosphere, pulling us directly into the middle of this ongoing conversation about plant life. It perfectly sets the tone for our entire explainer. We aren't reading a sterile academic textbook today. We are reading the lived, day-to-day reality of someone passionately nurturing growth.
So let's take a moment to get a sense of where this project is currently at. Eng didn't just go out and buy a heavily fertilized, perfectly manicured potted plant from a commercial nursery. Not at all. These plants were harvested directly from the wild. And if you know anything about gardening, transitioning wild plants into a domesticated garden is notoriously difficult. Yet somehow, two of these plants are currently growing rather well. Why are they succeeding? Well, it comes down to a really careful, structured approach. Eng deliberately placed them in two completely different microclimates just to observe how they'd adapt and respond. And the reward for all this careful cultivation and environmental testing? One of these plants has actually started to bloom, and Eng is expecting a much more vibrant display in the coming weeks.
Let's see how this builds our understanding of what exactly Eng is cultivating in these carefully chosen microclimates. Before we examine the incredible visual anatomy of the flower, we should probably establish its formal identity. The scientific name is Melastoma-malabathricum. Melastoma-malabathricum. It's quite a beautiful name to say out loud, isn't it? This is the formal botanical designation for the Singapore Rhododendron, and Eng is dedicating all this time, all this effort and observation to cultivating this specific plant for a very particular reason. It produces highly distinctive blooms and these utterly fascinating stamens. As we transition now into the anatomy of the bloom, I really want you to luxuriate in these sensory details, because this specific botanical structure is literally something to behold.
Now, what's really interesting about this is just how simple this number is, yet how incredibly foundational it is to the architecture of the flower we're studying. 5. The entire intricate, complex floral structure we are about to explore is supported by exactly 5 petals. But these aren't just any petals. Eng's notes specifically describe them as being broad and vibrantly purple. Just imagine this perfect foundation of 5 vibrant purple landing pads, all arranged to support and showcase the delicate reproductive structures resting right in the very center of the flower. This simple number 5 is the geometric baseline for absolutely all the beauty that follows.
And this brilliantly illustrates the absolute star of the show. Eng's diary specifically details the opportunity to capture crucial photos of these highly distinctive stamens. Think about the comparison here. In the very center, you have a tightly packed cluster of short, bright yellow stamens. It's almost like a dense burst of light right in the middle of the flower. But surrounding that yellow core, acting almost like a protective, sweeping barrier, are the outer stamens. These are completely different. They're longer, they're curved, and they are distinctively purple. Just visualize that striking contrast for a second. The bright, tightly packed yellow center exploding out into these long, sweeping, curved purple structures, all resting on those 5 broad purple petals we just talked about. It is undeniably the anatomical centerpiece of our explainer.
But you know, as any dedicated gardener knows, observation is only half the battle. The other half is taking action. And that brings us to what I like to call the gardener's dilemma. To prune or not to prune? This incredibly simple question shifts our narrative entirely away from purely botanical observation. We are diving right into a classic gardener's crossroads for Eng. Do you intervene and alter the plant with your own hands, or do you step back and just let the natural biological processes run their course? Let's take a look at how Ang reasoned through this.
So the crucial point is understanding the specific trade-offs at play. On one hand, there is a pretty strong argument for pruning. Initially, Ang heavily considered cutting back the branches. Why? Well, because pruning maintains the plant's overall size and actually increases the density of the foliage. It makes for a tidier, bushier plant. It's a super common gardening practice. But on the other hand, if Ang chooses to leave the plant exactly as it is, the plant is allowed to do what it's organically trying to do. Ang noticed that all the branches had already started to develop flower buds. If those buds are left alone, they're going to bloom, and they will potentially yield seeds. Faced with this exact dilemma, Ang chose to leave it be. The shears were put away, the branches were kept intact, and the plant was left to potentially produce a harvest.
Which leads us to a delightfully candid and honestly slightly humorous admission straight from Ang's diary. If you choose not to prune, and you let those flowers bloom, you are eventually rewarded with seeds. But, as Ang notes after seeing photos of them, the seeds are, honestly, rather ugly. It's such a wonderfully stark contrast. You have this magnificent, perfectly constructed flower with vibrant purple petals and those complex, dual-colored stamens that we spend so much time admiring, and its ultimate biological product is a seed that is entirely lacking in aesthetic charm. It really drives home the point that nature is immensely practical. It prioritizes the function of reproduction over visual beauty when it comes to the seeds themselves.
And that brings us to the ultimate question of our botanical micro-adventure. Will the ugly seeds of today successfully propagate the vibrant purple blooms of tomorrow? Ang decided not to prune purely on the chance of harvesting these ugly seeds for future propagation. So will it work? Well, Ang's diary entry concludes with a simple, grounded sentiment that pretty much defines the very essence of gardening. We'll have to wait and see. It perfectly encapsulates the quiet hope and really the immense patience required when working with nature. I hope this explainer has shown you just how much fascinating detail can be found in a single garden observation. Thank you so much for focusing in and learning with me today. Keep looking closely at the world around you, and I'll see you in the next explainer.